Welcome to the first episode of the ADHD Unfiltered Podcast. I'm Cherry, and
I'm
I've got
Emma.
with me, yay! This is obviously our first episode, but you might know us already from our content that we create across, different social media platforms. You might know me better as Cherry ADHD. You might think to yourself, "No, I've never heard of her." And then Emma, you might know as Mind Over Matter with Emma.
Chose the longest username that I could possibly choose.
I love it.
So we are starting a podcast, guys.
Exactly. Because basically we've, the reason for that is we've been texting for quite some time. I don't know how it started. I think I remember we connected on TikTok and then I messaged you because I got really excited.
You wrote a lovely comment on one of my posts and it was like, oh, I think we'd get on really well. And I was like, oh, I think we would. And then we did. So
yes,
yay.
exactly. I actually didn't expect us to get on that well, to be honest, because a lot of the times, and not to sound weird, but a lot of the times I'll get on really well with someone like over a few text messages and then you kind of forget about each other again because ADHD.
Yes. You fizzle out. It fizzles out.
Exactly. But with us, that hasn't happened yet. So,
fingers crossed. We're going well.
We are going well.
We are. And I think that's why we've wanted to do this as well, because we found a lot of support in each other from experiences. And we, when we first spoke on the phone, we spoke for ages about the experiences that we have as parents and people with ADHD. And we just realised that there's such a need for something like this to let people know that they're not alone, because it's quite hard not to feel alone sometimes when you're struggling.
Absolutely.
So that's what we wanted. We wanted something that's fun, easy to watch, bite-sized, nothing that you're going to get bored with. We all have a bad, hopefully. Our attention span isn't the best. And something where you just feel comforted and supported, because we all need a bit of that at the moment.
And I think especially with social media, it's so easy to get wrapped up in the perfect world of others and you start comparing yourself and then you start that whole cycle of guilt tripping and shaming yourself because you can't live up to your own high expectations then suddenly of yourself because you compare yourself to people that might be neurotypical or to people that might not, probably that do not show everything.
Yeah, and that's it. Is being someone who creates content myself now, I know how to make your house look good, because you just strategically place everything in the corner where you're not filming.
Literally, you just shove it away.
I've had people say to me, how do you keep your house looking so tidy? And I'm like, have you been here from the beginning? It's like, I don't. That's just a good day and a good angle, but it's nice to feel connected with people who get it, and there's no judgment, no shame, and sometimes our houses are messy and that's okay. Like, it doesn't take anything away from us as parents, as people. And I think it's a thing to work on, isn't it? It's not an overnight change in you still have that shame and guilt that creeps in. But it's getting easier knowing that actually the majority of people do live like us. And it's just that they're not on social media and they're not
absolutely. They don't exactly, because they fear being judged, being valued less. Because for some reason, I think society sometimes, I feel like, focuses on the wrong things.
Yes,
100%. and puts too much value in the wrong things. And I think therefore there is also this kind of misconception that people with ADHD are lazy, because we're really anything but lazy.
I know.
But maybe for neurotypical society standard, maybe they don't see us being productive in our ways. Yeah, we're actually really productive. Just not maybe in the way that society values it sometimes.
Because we do it differently, and I think being different has always been a stigma of, you should do it like everyone else does it because that's the right way. And it's something that I've grown up with thinking, well, I can't do it like that. What's wrong with me? Like, why I don't fit into that? And I think there's this huge movement recently of realizing on social media that so many more people feel like that than you would ever imagine, and have that guilt and that shame and can't keep up with their house. And why has it become this thing where your house is based on your worthiness of like how clean it is, how
Yeah,
productive you are? And you see a lot of things for ADHD out there, and it always kind of focuses on productivity.
yeah,
What about how you feel? Like, what about your emotions? That should come first, because if they're not in
absolutely.
check, your productivity isn't going to be either. And sometimes
No,
I don't want to be productive. Sometimes I want to just be and just
absolutely.
exist.
And that should be fine, shouldn't it? And I
Yes.
think I think that's one of the main difficulties actually for women, actually especially mums with ADHD. And it was such a kind of oh my God moment when I kind of read up about, the main difficulties for ADHD in mums or
Yeah.
ADHD as a parent was actually the difficulty with keeping up with household related chores. I just thought that was part of being a mum, and maybe I
Yeah.
was just a bit rubbish at it. Um,
Yes. That's exactly the
but
same.
but I felt so overwhelmed and overstimulated. And then at the same time, another one of the main symptoms is actually being constantly feeling that shame and guilt and feeling like you're falling short in
Yeah.
comparison to others because you
Yeah.
have maybe sometimes difficulties remembering play dates, remembering special school dates,
Oh,
remembering
yeah.
filling in forms for so that your daughter can go to a special day in
Yeah.
nursery, and it's all those little things where you kind of start to feel, oh my God, am I not good at this?
That's it. I had the same journey of, I would Google sometimes for hours of, why am I like this? Why am I not a good mum? I used to feel like that.
Yeah.
And I would get onto like forums and things and think, right, these people don't seem like they'd give this advice. And I'd be like, but I can't, that still doesn't work for me. It's not as if it's
No.
just a routine I need to get into. It's my brain genuinely is wired differently, and I didn't even realize it then. And I remember taking my son to preschool, and they were starting doing PE, and I
Yeah.
forgot his PE kit, and I went
Mm.
home and cried for like an hour because I felt like the worst mum in the world. And I was like, any normal person would probably just be like, oh, okay, that's annoying, like,
Yeah.
move on. But the shame I felt for that, because it was just one extra thing that I couldn't get right. And
Yeah.
I think that it was just
It's literally
constantly
it.
feeling, yeah, that just weighing you down. And it gets to the point where I do think that a lot of parents with ADHD get to crisis point, and that's
Yeah.
scary. It's really
Absolutely.
worrying,
Yeah.
because there's no support. There's no support out there for it, because it's just, oh, you'll get there. That's just what motherhood and parenthood's like. It's
Exactly.
actually not. It's not for a
No.
lot of people
It,
consistently, I think,
and
is
I
the,
think I think a lot of the times when people say, "Oh, that's just normal parenthood," etc., they don't really see the extent to which you're suffering, and they
yeah,
don't. They just get a glimpse of it, and maybe yes, actually, sometimes, every now and then, forgetting something or struggling keeping up with the household, that
yeah,
can be normal.
yeah,
But if it's to the extent that it's happening every single day, that you're struggling with this, and that you're, you constantly feel like you're falling short,
yeah.
then that's not normal.
No, that's what I've
And
tried to say, is consistency and the intensity of how you feel it is really important. Because of course I get this comment a lot of, that's just life, that's not ADHD. And I'm like, well, of course, for some people they're going to experience those things, because they're not just specific to ADHD. They are symptoms that everyone will experience from time to time. The difference is how intense it is and how
yeah,
consistent it is. And I
exactly.
get some parents that will see a video about ADHD, and they'll attack. And I'm like, if you're struggling, we should be working together. You
Yes.
shouldn't be attacking. Hopefully you should see it and think, I'm not alone. But I think
Yeah.
sometimes the word ADHD triggers people, and
Yeah.
they get quite defensive about it because of that lack of understanding that we all had, really. And
Absolutely.
I was like that too before I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
My friend said to me, you should really look into ADHD. And I felt at first really defensive, because I saw it as an insult to my intelligence. And now realizing it means nothing to do. It's got nothing to do with how intelligent or, anything to do with that. And
And
it's
we're
quite
still as
funny.
worthy as everyone else. We're still amazing
Exactly.
people, we still deserve to love each
Yeah.
other or ourselves,
Yeah.
and to be loved and valued. And
Exactly.
but there unfortunately still very much is a stigma around ADHD. And I do also feel a lot of kind of misinformation is, in people's heads around how
Yeah.
ADHD might look like in adults, especially in women and in
Yes.
mums.
Yes. And there's been very little research and studies done on adults, especially women. The
Yes.
criteria is still based off children.
Yeah.
So how I find it very difficult when, people will say to you, well, that's not ADHD. And it's like, but a lived experience is enough for you to have a very deep understanding of how it can portray in your life. And I think this is why we're getting so many content creators now who are smashing it, because they found something that's a hyperfixation, but it's also helping other people. So it's ticking off two boxes of this is fun for me and this is helping other people. And
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, a journey to be on, because what a difference it's making to so many people's lives, so many people. And I like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, for myself, I felt my mental health has kind of like steadily improved ever since I found out, one, about my ADHD diagnosis, but then two, actually researching it, looking into it, and then kind of eventually getting to the accepting point,
Yeah.
which is also kind of what I want to ask you. And I don't think we've ever really talked about it. How did you get your diagnosis when?
So mine was it was a faffy, horrible journey to begin with. And I started, 2019 was when my friend was going for her autism diagnosis. And when she said to me, you should look into ADHD. And for a while, I was like, no. And then I did. And I was like, oh. And I'm not joking when I say everything ticked. I ticked every box, and I was kind of like almost obsessed with researching into
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
then it was just before lockdown happened, and I rang the doctor, and I had a call over the phone. Oh no, it must have been during lockdown because it was over the phone, and this woman was horrible. She was so horrible. It set me back a good year and a half of
Bless you.
pursuing it. And she talked over me. She
Mm.
sighed when I was listing my symptoms, clearly
Oh
like
dear.
shaking with anxiety.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I had written like 4 pages of like notes. And she sighed at me and she said, because I was in college at the time doing a counselling course, she said, your college will be able to deal with this. This isn't a problem that we can deal with, which obviously, and that was wrong because the college
Interesting.
couldn't deal
Yeah.
with it. I just gave up, and I would say my mental health got really, really, really bad. And it wasn't until it was the beginning of the January last year, that's when I finally got the diagnosis. So it took from 2019 to that beginning of last year to go through that, which in the grand scheme of things
Bless
is
you.
short compared to some people.
Yeah.
I had to go private. So I had to, I think it was about £600-700 off my credit card. So that was
Yeah.
just, increasing that debt. And it took, emotionally, even though it was a great experience doing it private,
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much it would bring up. And I found the assessment and the whole experience really quite challenging, because
Yeah.
I
Mm.
almost thought that they were going to go, no, you don't have it. There's nothing wrong with you. And then I'd leave feeling like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
But when I did get the diagnosis, I almost felt really, I kind of felt angry actually. I felt angry at like the world. I felt
Yeah.
angry at, and I know it's not my parents' fault because it was a different time, but I felt
Yeah.
anger at them. I felt
Yeah.
just let down.
It's such a big mix of emotions, I find, as well, when you get a late diagnosis,
Yes.
because actually I did read somewhere that you almost go through all the stages of
Of
grief.
grief. That's
Yeah.
exactly how it felt. It's exactly, because the anger was the worst stage for me. I couldn't, and I still feel like that today. I still feel like there's some there
Yeah.
of just what I've missed out on. And,
Yeah.
I didn't go to
Absolutely.
university because I was in a chaotic stage of, looking at it now, impulsive decisions, poor decisions, getting involved with the wrong types of people. At 17, I thought I was really cool, dating older men, being very like irresponsible. And I feel like if I had just had the right support back then, I would be in a totally different, I would have gone on a
Yeah.
totally different trajectory. But you sometimes have to just remind yourself that, okay, well, that's happened. There's no point dwelling on it. I've got the answers now. And I would say, like yourself, I would say, for the most part, my mental health now is way more stable than it ever was before. It's still a work in
Yeah.
progress.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's days where I'm like, Jesus. But yeah. So what about you? How was your journey?
I mean, firstly, well done for persevering. I can't imagine, how difficult that must have been, because
Yeah.
actually a lot of the times we do also gaslight ourselves because of all the
Yes.
times
Yeah.
that we've masked, we've had to mask our difficulties throughout our lives,
Yeah.
which then actually has been researched to lead to low self-esteem, imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, you name
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
actually, the backwards thing is, if you have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or anything like that, then you are less likely to get an accurate diagnosis of ADHD,
Yes.
because a lot of the times that will be just overshadowed.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I
people
got.
will, yeah.
I'm sorry, interrupting you.
No, no,
Classic.
that's fine.
It's
We will interrupt each other.
yes, generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed with in 2010, and that
Yeah,
diagnosis, I would say, is still somewhat valid, because I
yeah,
still have anxiety, but that diagnosis overshadowed every concern that I've ever had since. Because
yeah.
even if I go in and say, something totally irrelevant to anxiety, they'll look at that and be like, you're just anxiety, you're just
Yes,
overthinking.
absolutely. Yeah.
And
You almost
again,
get gaslit with
yes,
that.
exactly. And I
Yeah,
think that's happened to so many people,
yeah,
so many. But anyway,
absolutely.
yes, your
W-
story.
No, no. Well, I was also diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, by the way.
Really?
There's quite a high kind of comorbidity, therefore,
Yeah.
because of all the masking of the difficulties, etc.,
Yes.
that can happen, or that can result from undiagnosed ADHD or untreated ADHD. In my case, it was quite different in the sense, well, it was different and it also wasn't, in the sense that I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. Um,
Right.
so I think I was like 6 or 7 in Switzerland, because that's where we lived at the time. But
Yeah.
and I remember having to take pills, so I did get medicated for it at the time. But then that all stopped, and I never knew that it was ADHD. I don't remember it either. And then
No.
I started university, and mind you, in that time I was like in and out of therapy for depression and
Yeah.
anxiety and low self-esteem, a lot of different things that I was struggling with. And I think I started therapy from about like 12 years on, and I was in and out of therapy until the age of 19, 20. And
Wow.
then I started university, and suddenly I was getting like kind of flashbacks of like going to assessments and going to different tests. And I was like, that rings a bell. So I started to ask my parents some questions, and they were like, oh, yeah, by the way, you were diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 6 or 7, but don't worry, it doesn't exist.
Oh no. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So, and I was like, oh, wait, hang on, why? Why are you saying that? And basically, bless them, my dad had found this book or this article, research, whatever it was, that basically said at the time that ADHD, because ADHD was like so new, they were disregarding it as a trend back then. And it said that ADHD was just made up for the benefit of the pharma industry. And obviously, in his mind, he didn't want to
Yeah,
treat
as a
his daughter
parent, of
unnecessarily with
course.
medication
Yeah.
for a diagnosis that seemed to be made up at that point.
Yeah, and there was very little information about it then, so you would
Yes.
be a bit like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't want to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Especially in girls, in women, you know. Yeah, so I already got a little bit of a mixture of emotions back then, and I felt like this massive weight off my shoulders, almost like a sense of relief. And I was like, oh my God,
yeah,
this makes so much sense.
yeah.
Like a cloud was lifted, and I could
Yes,
suddenly see a little bit clearer. And I
yeah,
I remembered looking it up and researching into it, and I was like, oh my God, I tick all those boxes.
yeah,
And then, but then I still somehow pushed it aside for myself, because I was so much in the habit of like almost gaslighting myself and like masking,
yeah,
that I was like, do you know what? I'm fine. I'm in university. I obviously, I don't struggle with it that much. Not
yeah,
knowing that a lot of those mental health difficulties were directly kind of correlated, or maybe even
yes,
caused partially by being untreated and undiagnosed, basically,
yeah,
with ADHD for so long. And then COVID hit, and well, I became a mum, and COVID hit, and suddenly I wasn't able to mask anymore.
yeah,
And I remember saying to people that it suddenly feels like ever since I became a mum, that part of my brain that was fine, or that I thought was fine,
that you
now I
thought,
know it was
yeah,
masking, that part of my brain that was able to mask my ADHD difficulties, with mental health consequences,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
suddenly wasn't able to mask anymore. And it just kind of all came crashing down. And
yeah,
I had an incredible low. Like, I was depressed. I was anxious. I thought maybe I had postpartum
yeah,
anxiety or depression,
yeah,
but I didn't really fit all those boxes either. And I
yeah,
was like,
literally
what is
same.
wrong with me?
Yes,
And it was really, really tricky, until I actually came across a post about ADHD in mums or in women myself,
yeah,
and it just kind of brought it back to the forefront of my
tension,
mind.
yeah,
And I was like, oh my God, maybe ADHD has impacted my life way more than I thought. So then I went into like a hyper focus deep dive,
yes, yeah,
and did a lot of research, and suddenly it just all made sense. And I was like, and at that point I was then starting to be able to accept it more. I had a therapist as well, who was the first therapist, didn't really do much. That was like for CBT for depression, and it didn't really
um,
work.
yeah.
And I was like, this isn't doing anything. If anything, it's making it worse.
Yes, yes, yeah. I had that exact same experience with CBT. You've got to have the right type of therapy
Yes.
with the person who gets it
Yeah,
to be able to get
absolutely.
somewhere, haven't you?
And I think the therapist at the time, they realized it wasn't working. So they
Yeah.
then went on to a fast track for a specialist for complex anxiety disorder, or something like that.
Right.
So I got intensive CBT then from a specialist, and she was so much better. And she helped me in to kind of accept more my diagnosis,
Yeah.
despite that she didn't know much about treating people with ADHD and anxiety herself.
Mm.
At least it kind of helped me process that shame, that guilt a little bit
Yes.
more.
It's
And
almost like the extra baggage that you've
yeah,
picked up that was just making the symptoms of ADHD worse because you had all that piling on. So dealing with that
yeah,
kind of takes away. What was
yeah.
that?
That was my cat, just and my dog.
I just saw like a fluffy kind of. I was like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
have
what
two
my
cats and a dog and a toddler, so
crazy. I've got two kids, two cats, a grown adult partner that feels like another kid, and then myself. And
well, I do
sometimes
have a
it's
partner
like,
as well, yeah.
yeah, but I just feel like we almost pile it on more for
Yeah.
ourselves
Oh
sometimes.
my
But
God. Yeah,
animals, you've got to have.
definitely. I
Yeah,
feel like there's always that sort of, because I feel like there's that part that always craves like the novelty.
yeah.
Like as
Oh
soon
gosh,
as like a
yeah,
routine starts to build up, which is actually really, really good for us,
yes,
you start to feel that boredom creep in, and you're like, you're like, oh, I need another challenge now.
Honestly,
Life
I
is a bit too
feel
easy
like
now.
it's
I'm
so
used to a life
true.
on advance
Yeah,
level.
honestly, I put so much pressure on myself because of that chasing novelty,
Yeah.
boredom, and then the other part of me, the anxious part of me, as soon as I've piled that stuff on, is like, why have you done this to yourself again? And this is why I also have, the struggles of, am I also autistic? Because I
Mm,
tick so many boxes of that where the anxiety
yeah.
makes more
Yeah.
sense with it being that. And you just start to think, like, where do I begin?
I
Because
know.
there's so much to think about. And I feel like my brain is two sides that are total opposite of each other that are just
Hmm.
battling continuously.
Yeah.
And I create my own problems. I would say 90% of the problems I have, I've
I can
created
relate.
by doing silly things or jumping into something without thinking about it or
Yeah.
piling on because
But
I
then
feel
at
like
the
I have to
same
prove.
time, for me, it's that weird, like, kind of almost contradictive thing that if I follow my impulsivity, it makes me feel alive, it makes me
Yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah,
happy,
yeah.
and then shortly followed by, oh my God,
It's
what
it's
the?
it's become a demand. I feel like that's what I do. I'm like, oh my God, I've made such a fun plan. I'm so excited. And within an hour, I have this feeling of almost dread of like,
Yeah.
you've got to do that. You've actually got to do that. And I think the ADHD in me is very fun. It wants to do fun
Hmm.
things. It wants to make plans. It wants to make memories. But the anxiety in me is like, please don't. Like, I just want a safe life.
Yeah.
And I do think that as a parent,
Yeah.
oh my Lord, like you want to make fun memories, you want to do fun
Absolutely.
days out.
But then the
That's when my
planning comes
sensory
in and you're
overload.
like,
Oh,
"Ugh."
I get in the
Yeah.
car, the car when you get
Oh
in
my
and you're
God,
just
don't start.
flappy and stressed. There's just, it's a
Oh,
really awful feeling because
I,
you want it to be such a fun day,
yeah.
but you just before you've started, you're frazzled.
Do you know, I don't do long car rides anymore because of
No.
that. Because as soon as I see car rides takes longer than like 20 minutes, even like 17 minutes, that's like a benchmark.
Yeah.
Like that's like a great point there. Anything above that, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be
Yes.
awful. I'm going to be
Yeah.
so overstimulated because being in the car and driving already, I feel like it's overstimulating. Like
Yeah.
my driving story, I mean, that's a whole different area.
Yeah.
Because with driving, you have to be able to multitask, and
Yeah.
in professional like terms, that's called multi-channeled attention.
Yes.
And with ADHD, you actually don't really have that. You have single-channeled attention, really. So, and you struggle with multi-channeled attention. Sometimes it can appear that you're multi-channeled attention when you're actually not really paying much attention to one thing
That's so
and more
interesting.
focusing on another.
Yeah.
And therefore, driving can be really, really stressful until it's maybe like a little bit of a routine and it's
Yes.
built up and you don't have to multi-channel or try and multi-channel so hard anymore.
That explains
But
everything because I still don't have I'm 32 in December and I have not got my driving license and I didn't even try and do a test because
yeah,
learning with a manual, like the gear stick and all of the different things to think about, I once on a lesson stalled at a roundabout and my reaction was I just sat there and went, I want to get out now. At a roundabout. He's like, you can't do that. I was like, I want to get out
oh
now.
my God, I
And
had
it's
like,
because my brain just went, nope.
yeah, I had full on, I kid you not, I had full on panic sweats one day driving home from work
Oh no.
because it was dark and it was rainy and the lights, and I know this might sound crazy, but the lights were distracting me.
Yes, I know
I
exactly what you
kept
mean.
trying to look at the lights and I'm like, I can't look at the lights, like the street lights, I mean, with
Yes,
the lights,
yes,
the street lights were so much distracting me from the road that I
yeah,
was like, I want to stop, I want to get out,
yes,
I don't want to do this any longer.
yeah.
And
And
since then
people
I don't
don't.
do night
Yeah,
driving.
and I totally get why you don't because I think I've got my first automatic driving lesson end of September because I need to drive, but I feel
Yeah,
like I won't drive because I enjoy driving. I will drive because I have to,
yeah.
because especially if I have the kids in the car and if they are
Oh,
being noisy or overstimulating, I don't I wouldn't feel safe. I wouldn't feel safe
no.
driving. And I
Do,
just think like it's so hard to explain to people. who don't get it, because it's like, well, driving's just a basic skill that you need in life. It's like, okay, yes, but I
But it's
struggle with many
so
basic skills.
absolutely, and it's so overstimulating. I mean, think about the amount of different things that you have to pay attention to at the
Yeah.
same time. You
Oh,
have
it's
to plan
horrible.
ahead as well.
Yes.
Like I actually had to be taught that skill. I remember like driving with my partner, like learning, getting
Yeah.
into it. And he was like, "Oh, you have to plan ahead where you're going to go next." I was like, "What?"
When they say in like 5 miles, turn left at the next, and I'm like, why do you think I'm going to remember that? Like, I need you
Right?
to tell me very close to the point, because otherwise my brain's just going to start overthinking that, and I'm not going to pay
Yeah.
attention to the road.
Not to mention, I actually don't know how many, how long 5 miles are.
I wouldn't have a
Like,
clue.
can anyone estimate that correctly?
I
I don't
honestly
know.
do think sometimes that they want people to like fail, because it's like, why would you ask a question? Or they say, on the next left, take the next right, and I'm like, you lost me at the
Oh
first
my God.
instruction you gave to me,
Instructions
and I
are
feel
a
silly.
nightmare. I I'm
Yes.
I'm forever grateful for Google Maps.
Yeah.
Without it, I am completely lost.
I'd be lost
Even
in the
on,
desert without it for
yeah,
years. I'd be still there.
to be honest, even in like routine, routes, I still have to use
Yes.
maps just in case
I
I
don't
don't
blame
know.
you. Yeah, and
Because I often zone out and
yeah.
then I'll look into on Google Maps. I'm like, oh shit, I need to,
Yeah, get back on track. I have lived in the same area pretty much my whole life, and because I haven't driven the routes, when people come over and I'm in the car with them and they're like, "Okay, where do we go?" I'm like, "I I don't know," because when I'm a
Literally.
passenger,
Oh, I'm
I
so
zone
glad
out.
you say that.
Yeah, and they're like, "You've lived here all your life," and I'm like, "I don't know what you want me to tell you.
I know.
I
Like
can't tell you how to get there."
I had taxi drivers ask me like which, where to turn and like
Yeah. Oh,
what
hey.
route to go, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Literally, like, mate, have
Put
you
in
not got a
Google
map?
Maps.
It's so, I think there's so many problems where recently I actually said to my partner, and I said, I think I struggle so much more than I have ever realized, because
Yeah,
there are some skills that I should find easier, but I don't. And it's
yeah.
not that I haven't tried. And I think this is what annoys me, is when people call me lazy.
Oh my
If they
God,
just
it
took
triggers me
five
so
minutes to
hard.
listen to my brain, or to see like what I do in a day, and it realized, like, okay, to you I might seem lazy, but to me, I'm doing what I need to do, and we all have
Yeah,
different needs and lives.
and
And if I prioritize, you know, doing a random job like clearing out the toys, and instead of doing the washing up,
you still
why
done
do
a
you
job.
care?
I
Yeah,
mean,
like,
that's still
it's like it's
amazing.
weird judgmental, and I do find a lot of it is the older generation tend to have this more of a ingrained into them from their own generational trauma, I assume.
Yeah,
But my
yeah.
nan will come in and she'll say, "You really need to keep on top of that." And I'm like,
Hmm.
Margaret, I've got 2 kids, two
Yeah,
cats, probably some other mental illnesses I don't know about. Can we settle down? Like, you've only ever had
yeah,
one child. You had a lot easier life. You had a lot of money, a nice house, and life kind of went well. And I think people think that everyone has the same experiences, and it's
yeah.
just not true. We all have
Or
different.
should have the same experiences and skill sets,
Yeah.
etc. I think there's also, especially on a parent and on mums, there's this massive weight of expectations that
Yes.
you should be able at certain, like good at certain skills
Yeah.
that maybe you've struggled with all your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
you don't get a manual to tell you how to be a parent either. So you are thrown into this deep end.
yeah,
And I don't know about you, but I remember seeing parents just smashing it and seeming so happy and so content, and
yeah.
taking their babies out on days out with the travel bag and everything all packed. And there was
Oh
me
my
in my
God.
home, covered in baby sick, really
The
tired, really frazzled, thinking, what is wrong with me?
Do you
Because
know,
I didn't do that.
it took me a while to be able to like feel confident enough to go out by
Yeah.
myself with
Yeah.
my baby.
Yeah.
Um, when she was still a baby, and the amount of times that felt so awful for forgetting the basics. I'd
Yes.
I'd I'd forget nappies
Oh, me
when she was in
too.
when she was like 3 months.
And pooing all the time, so you need
And
the
yeah,
nappies.
yeah, absolutely. And I was like,
You
yeah,
feel
I
incapable.
felt absolutely awful.
Yes.
And I think what often people don't see as well is we try our hardest. We
Yes.
try so
Yeah.
hard, and sometimes maybe a skill or a chore that to you might seem easy takes us like 3 days to complete. But
So
then on the
true.
flip side, there's also chores that to other people that they seem
Yeah.
hard, and you do them within like a few minutes, and
Yes,
you're
and
like,
that's an important part of it. Of
yeah,
We always talk about the negatives of parenting with ADHD,
yeah,
but I truly believe that my ADHD, in the grand scheme of things, makes me a better parent because
same,
I like having fun with them. I
yeah,
like being silly, and when I have those energy bursts, we
yes,
enjoy ourselves and we get each other. And I would say I'm so much more emotionally connected than I see other parents with their children. And
absolutely.
when he has big emotions, I'm there with him and I'm like, I get it. I'm here with you.
Exactly.
You
I
are
have big
safe.
emotions too, and
Yes.
I'm
And
still
it's
trying
okay to
to work
show
my way
them.
out. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's okay to show them.
Yeah.
And I think because if you are late diagnosed, and you have to almost do so much healing and so
Yeah.
much like
Yeah.
unraveling of yourself that
So much.
you're so self-aware, and I think that can really really contribute to being a better
Yeah,
parent. And
yeah, it does. Because for me, if I've messed up, and I do, don't get me wrong, there are days where I will
absolutely.
snap and I will just be a grumpy mum. And I always, always, always will say, even if it takes me an hour
Yeah,
to get to that point, I will always apologize and say, Mummy's having a
same.
grumpy day. It's not you, it's
Yeah,
me. And if it has been, his behavior has been challenging, I'll open that conversation up to explain why I found it challenging and what I can do to help him so that we're both
yeah,
on the same page. Whereas with
exactly.
me, with my parents, and they're not bad people, but the emotional connection. And I feel like this was a problem for loads of children in the 90s,
Mm.
but I was sent to my room to cry. And if
Yeah,
I came out, I
same.
had to be over it, and it was brushed under the rug.
Yes,
And
it's very
that
much authoritarian
very
parenting.
much. And that, to
Yeah,
me, has caused me problems because now I don't know how to deal with conflict with my partner. Until recently, I would just walk away and I
yeah.
would go and sulk in my room. And
It was
now
for
it's like,
me either
oh,
or. Either I'd
yeah,
shut down,
yes, yeah,
or I'd go in the full on yelling
yeah.
and
There's no
like,
between.
saying things that I don't want to say, you know.
Yes,
And
the emotional
there wasn't
dysregulation.
exactly, there wasn't much in between, and I never knew it felt like the emotional dysregulation felt like almost like a switch being flicked, and
Yes,
I
and
couldn't I couldn't regulate myself
yeah,
anymore.
when once
And
it's
I
been
thought,
done, you're just
yeah,
that's it. You can't get
yeah,
out of it until you get out of it.
exactly. And I was, I was called so many times. I was being called over dramatic. I was
Yeah,
making a scene. But I couldn't help. Like if I was breaking down, I'd break down. I'd sob
yeah.
and cry. I would curl
Me
up on the
too.
floor, or I'd hide under the covers,
Yeah.
or I'd scream, and
You
I'd
just
hit
needed to get it
pillows. And
out, but
yeah,
you
it
didn't
was,
know how. And
yeah,
I had that too with my parents, where I can remember vividly of their
yeah,
reaction of, "Oh God, Emma, come on, like get up, just stop being
yeah,
silly." And there would be times where I can remember thinking, "Why aren't they helping me? Like, why aren't they?"
yeah,
You don't know how to regulate as a child anyway, but add ADHD onto that as you grow up.
yeah,
Oh my Lord, the emotional dysregulation. And I would always be
absolutely.
told from a very young child, you're either up or down and you're never in the middle. And I don't know how to talk to
Yeah,
you. And it's like, I see
yeah,
it in my children and I think to
yeah.
myself, well, I want them to be able to regulate themselves.
Absolutely.
And
I've done so much, like
so
the
much
amount of
work.
research and
Yeah,
work I've done because I was like, well, if I don't know how to regulate myself, how
yeah.
am I going to teach her how to regulate herself?
Exactly, exactly. And
And
you don't
it's
want to continue that cycle.
no,
So
exactly.
essentially we're that's the thing. I think there's a pattern here where you will find that the cycle breakers in families are often the scapegoats. The black sheep of the family are neurodivergent in some way. I genuinely believe there's a huge link there. And it's not all everyone, but I think if there was a study done it, I think the statistics would show that a lot of the people have ADHD, autism,
Yeah.
and just have a brain that's wired differently.
Yeah.
and nobody really ever gets it unless
And
they have a brain like yours.
not to mention, we'll often also question, ways of doing things. We'll be like,
Yes.
well, what's the sense of that? Where's the
Yeah.
logic?
Yeah.
And if I don't find the logic or a good explanation, then I won't do it,
Yeah,
because why?
exactly. I've always, and I think that's the same with parenting, is I'm
Exactly.
really trying to take on this lower demand approach of, why would I create a battle just because society says
Yes,
that that should be a thing?
absolutely.
If we don't want to sit at the table and eat, we'll sit in a way that's comfortable for us as a family
Yes.
still.
Oh, thank you so
And
much.
yeah, and we don't even have a dining table because we can't fit one in the
Do you
house,
know,
but
we
we sit
we've
and
got a
do
dining
it together.
table, but a lot of the times it's filled with, arts and
Stuff.
crafts or
Yeah.
laundry.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And
But
but why
we
should we have to sit at a
we
table?
exactly, we're comfortable.
Yeah,
We still have good times. We connect with each other whilst we're
exactly.
eating.
Exactly.
There's all these kind of like, or kind of standards that, where I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Or like trying to teach your children respect by screaming and shouting at them.
Oh,
And I'm like, well, that's not respectful to
e-
them. So,
exactly. I've
yeah,
learned this recently as well, of why would I expect my 5-year-old to do something that I struggle with as a
exactly.
31-year-old? And I used to be very shouty and yelly, and I had no regulation.
Yeah.
And looking at that now, oh, I hate that. And I work every day to avoid being like that. And there are times where it comes
And
out and
it's
you
a
get
hard,
overstimulated,
absolutely.
but you've
It's a
got to
hard,
find, yeah, it's
yeah,
so difficult, but
it's, yeah.
you've got to find like kindness to yourself more than anything, because if you feel shame and guilt,
Oh my
all
God,
you
so
do is
much
keep
so.
yourself in that low place, and you end
Yeah,
up snapping more, and you end up more
exactly.
angry. And it's self-care is like, oh, self-care this, self-care that. Often it can be frustrating as a parent because you think, I haven't got the time, but you
Yeah.
do. You do have that time, even if it's 2 minutes, to do something that just makes you feel good. And I'm learning
Um,
that now.
I think that's just the thing. You have to almost, to be able to do that, you have to put yourself almost not as a priority, but yes,
Yeah.
also as a priority. So I've kind of adapted this me as well approach of
Yes.
like, look, I'm gonna try and make my daughter's needs met, but
Yeah.
I shouldn't neglect my own needs, because if they are
Exactly.
neglected, I'll get more regulated,
Yeah.
dysregulated,
And it's
and
just a
it's
knock-on, pile-on
yeah,
effect. Yeah.
absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
I'm gonna have to finish because I can hear my baby crying downstairs and she's due his nap.
That's
And
absolutely
I can
fine. Oh,
just
it's been a
imagine someone's gonna get very overstimulated if I don't help.
yeah, absolutely.
Why did I gain some
You
clothes?
you crack on. It's
We've
been a
got a good
pleasure.
45 minute here, so
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see each other for part